Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da. Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da.
Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to a brand new episode of Geek to Me Radio, a full show. First up, Joe Menendez talks about Henry Danger the movie. We have Chapman Macclain Way talking about the Kings of Tupelo series on Netflix. We've got Joshua Zetumer talking about Say Nothing on Hulu, and we've got Mary Robertson Arianna LaPenne talking about Glitter and Greed, the Lisa Frank story. All that and more. Stand by.
We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek from Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all.
And if you are driving around the greater St. Louis area tonight, listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, hello to all of you out there. If you're streaming us online on the KTRS website or on the app, we appreciate you doing just that. As always, if you're hearing us after the fact in the podcast form on whatever platform you do get your podcast, we appreciate you finding us, subscribing and listening there. Hopefully by now you've left us a 5-star review. If you are listening to this after the fact on YouTube, do me a favor and click the subscribe button. Also hit that bell notification. That way you get a notification every time we go live with video, which is not the case tonight. I am not in town. This is a brand new show. Don't worry, it's not a best of, but I am out of, honestly, I'm out of the country at the moment. Last minute trip. So want to make sure we had a lot of good content for you. And I think we've accomplished that. So we will be back next week with video. So don't worry about that. In the meantime, I've got 4 great interviews I've been kind of holding on to. Sometimes, obviously, I get these interviews ahead of time and I think, great, I'll air this. And then I get a live guest is willing to come on the show live. I'm like, I can't really put a pre-recorded and say no to a live guest. So some of these aren't as timely as I would like them, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to play them because they're great interviews about some fantastic projects that are out there on the various streaming platforms. First up, we're going to talk with Joe Menendez. This one is a recent one. I just did this interview earlier last week, and Henry Danger, the movie, is out. I'll get to talk to him all about that. So without further ado, let's go to Joe Menendez.
Right now we're talking with accomplished producer, writer, director Joe Menendez. Captain Man returns in Henry Danger the movie as of January 17th. You can catch it streaming on Paramount and Nickelodeon. I appreciate your time today, Joe.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. It's funny. I know you directed episodes of Star Trek Picard. We just recently had David Blass, one of the production designers of that episode of that series, on as well. So getting the chance to talk to you now, especially about a fun project like Henry Danger, is great. Talk a little bit about being attached to the movie as a director and producer.
First of all, I love Dave, by the way. I've got here in my office, I've got like his gigantic book of art that he gave me on the show. And I have it prominently featured here in my office. It's amazing. I could talk Star Trek forever. But what's great about Henry Danger the movie, though, is that I started like 25 years ago. I started in the family space. Nickelodeon actually gave me my sort of like in earnest sort of opportunities to start directing for them 25 years ago. And my career in the last sort of 12, 13 years has sort of gone into sort of a second phase, where I've gone into drama and sci-fi. Like you mentioned, I've done shows like Star Trek Picard and Snowpiercer and From Dusk Till Dawn, very different shows from the family space. But when this script came to me, they were looking for a director, frankly, that can do the family show, but that could also sort of do the elevated superhero action visual effects stuff. And when I read the script, I was like, it's got to be me. It's got to be me. And so thankfully, they said yes, and here I am. And so for me, it's like the perfect fusion of my two loves, you know, the sort of genre, scopy kind of fantasy stuff that I love, but also the family space. I grew up. I'm a guy that grew up in the '80s, so I grew up on Spielberg and Zemeckis and Amblin movies and Star Wars. So I love that escapist popcorn kind of movie, and that's what Henry Danger's movie is.
Yeah, I host events here in St. Louis, and we just had a Gremlins event and a Clue event, so I'm right there with you on the '80s movies. That's my wheelhouse as well. And with this particular one, I know there's such a, the superhero genre has been basically redefined. It's now a movie category unto itself. And when you talk about making it that family friendly, what are some of the challenges in that? Because I know you want the big action, but you also want families to feel like this is something that's safe for the kids to watch and everything. How do you approach that as a director and producer on projects like Henry Danger the movie?
That's a great question. We talked a lot about it. Obviously we're making this movie for sort of three different audiences, because we're making it for the OG audience, if you will, the original kids that have now grown up, are in their late teens, early 20s, that still have a lot of love for Henry Danger the series. And then there's the new audience of young kids that are watching it now, that have become big fans, that are watching it in rerun. And then there's us, then there's the parents, and all of us as parents have sat down with our kids to watch a movie with them, and all we hope is that we can sit down and enjoy it just as much as they do, that it's made for the entire family and not just for kids. So when we are talking about a superhero movie and making it a legitimate superhero movie, the thing that the series had is it was a multicam sitcom. So but I always felt that the show was aspiring to do bigger, scopier stuff, but sort of in the multicam space, that's really difficult to accomplish. Mm-hmm. In a movie, we could do all that. So when we were designing these set pieces, I really looked for being able to tell the story and have the kind of superhero action and superhero fights that you're used to when you see a superhero movie, what you're expecting. But because it is a movie for family and it's a superhero family comedy, there's always talks about where the bar is and how far you can go. And so what we've discovered is that a lot of the same audience that watches this show and is going to watch this movie are watching the Avengers and are watching Superman. So there's an expectation that they have when they see a superhero movie. So we were definitely aware of that. So we said, well, we have to deliver that. We have to give them a legitimate, elevated superhero movie. But there was certainly a lot of discussion about where we can go with stuff. So we were always aware of violence and making sure that the violence was cool and impactful, but not something where bones break. Right. We're not doing Punisher. So it was always an emphasis on fun. So we kept the action fun and cool. And so everything that you see, the younger kids and the older kids and the parents are going to be going, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. And that was the emphasis on fun and cool, as opposed to something that they have to cover the kids' eyes. We don't want that. We don't want any parent covering their kids' eyes. So that's not going to happen in Henry Danger the movie. It's a big popcorn escapist movie for everybody.
So it'll be more along the lines of a Superman the Animated Series, not The Boys, is kind of what you're telling me.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Richard Donner, Superman. That was we looked at that one. I mean, that's our day. That's our jam. That's what we grew up on. So those kind of fun movies that as much as I love Zack Snyder, we're not doing the Zack Snyder version. Sure. We're doing the sort of fully accessible version for all audiences of all ages.
Let's say that people aren't familiar with the Henry Danger series, and this may be their first introduction to it when they see this movie. Is there something when you're working on this project that you want to have some Easter eggs in there for the fans, some nods to the series, but you also want to keep it fresh for anyone who has never seen the series? Was that a challenge at all, or is that something that's just gonna be no, this is great for returning fans and brand new eyes?
100%. We definitely early on in the movie we basically recap where we left off, so that anybody who's uninitiated will be able to enjoy it. We didn't want the movie to be inside baseball that was just made for fans, and if you didn't watch the show, you don't understand what's going on. So we definitely we're aware that there are people that haven't watched the series or have forgotten the series. So we basically have a sequence early in the movie where it recaps in a very fun way what the series did and where the series left off. And then, as you said, there are Easter eggs throughout the movie for the fans that were the OG fans, as I call them. But the movie is self-sustained. The movie is something that has to stand on its own 2 feet. We don't lean on nostalgia. We don't want to have it be where, like, if you're not a fan of the show, you can't enjoy the movie. It has to be something that worked on its own. So I always say that the movie and the series are like cousins. They're related, but they're different.
Gotcha.
But you'll be able to watch this, and even if you haven't seen the series, you're going to be able to enjoy Henry Danger the movie. And if you've seen Henry Danger the series and you're a fan, there's going to be extra little sauce for you as well.
Perfect. And we mentioned Star Trek Picard that you worked on it. You shouted out some of the series you've worked on. I love Evil with Mike Coulter. You got to work on Quantum Leap, 12 Monkeys, From Dusk Till Dawn, the series, which that original movie is one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies of all time. Which one of these series, when you're working on some of them, has just been an absolute pinch me moment for you? Like, I can't believe I'm working on the Quantum Leap reboot. Or what series has really just kind of be like, oh, this is it. I've made it.
Yeah, no, it has to be Star Trek Picard. It's like that first day that I walked into my office, first day of prep. There was a note tacked to a corkboard next to my desk in my office, and it was from Jonathan Frakes.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
He just wrote on there, "Welcome aboard. It's a hell of a ride." And then he put his phone number down at the bottom to call him. When I'm like, I walked in, and it's like I'm in 30 seconds into my first day, and I've got Jonathan Frakes' phone number. Meeting, like, the first time they walked me over to meet Patrick, it was amazing. And, but what as much as I love the genre and I love the franchise, and I knew that I was sort of, stepping into this train that was this immense franchise, and I was aware that I was doing Star Trek, I also at that point said, I'm working with actors. These are people that at some point the fan has to kind of take a step back, and the director has to come forward, because now I'm tasked with telling these stories that I've been hired to do. So once I got past the initial, like, oh my God, it's Patrick Stewart, oh my God, it's Jonathan Frakes, now it's how do I tell the story? And so working with Patrick, and we had a number of meetings and a number of conversations about what we were doing with his character, because he'd been playing Jean-Luc Picard since the 80s. And so it was really fantastic to develop where the character was being taken by Terry Matalas and Akiva Goldsman forward. But much like stepping into this massive franchise of Star Trek Picard, that's how I felt when I stepped into Henry Danger the movie. I am now being tasked with taking care of this franchise. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's something that I've done now a number of times, as you mentioned. So that was kind of the fun of it, is like I will endeavor to take care of this franchise and move it forward in a way that fans will love, but also bring in new fans too.
And my final question, will Captain Man return? Are there plans for a second Henry Danger movie, or can you not say at this point?
I can't say, but all I will say is that it's got something that will make everybody sit up and cheer, for sure. You got to stick with the movie all the way to the end.
All right. Henry Danger, the movie, premieres as of Friday the 17th on Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon. Joe Menendez, it's been fantastic to talk to you. I wish we had more time, but hopefully we can have you on again at some point.
Anytime you want, you let me know. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much.
There he goes, Joe Menendez. Check that out. Again, Henry Danger, the movie, now streaming on Nickelodeon. You can catch it there. And that should be a lot of fun. We're going to take a brief commercial interlude here. We are going to come back with my interview. We're going to be talking with Chapman Way and Macclain Way about their Netflix series, The Kings of Tupelo. Incredibly bizarre series. If you haven't checked it out yet, you definitely should. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. Please stand by.
Hey, this is Phil Lamar.
Homies Conrad.
The samurai known as Jack. And you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
We're back. Geek to Me Radio, heard here every Sunday night on the Big 550 KTRS. Not always live, but this is a new show regardless. This is new interview stuff, even though I'm not in studio. Again, I'm out of the country at the moment. I'll be back soon, though, and we'll be back next Sunday with a new live show. Joey V will be joining me again in studio, so we will have video. I want to make sure we tell you about the City of St. Charles, the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. Check out the website, discoverstcharles.com. If you haven't been over there lately, there's a lot of stuff to see and a lot of stuff to do. I know it's been a little cold out, but you know what? Spring's right around the corner. It's almost here. You can almost feel it. We're in the end of January. February is on its way. Pretty soon it'll be March and then April. Then we'll all be complaining about how hot it is outside. But that's great because whether it's hot, cold, or baby bear, just right, there's always something fun going on in the City of St. Charles down there in historic Main Street. Such a cool place, whether or not you're wanting to get out and try some new foods at different restaurants, or you're wanting to find a unique gift for that special someone. Valentine's Day is coming up, and there'll be a lot of fun places to shop right up and down North Main where you can get some nice little something for that special someone in your life. And speaking of Valentine's Day, their Once Upon a Valentine's Festival is happening the 8th and 9th of February, so the weekend before Valentine's Day. Get out there in the streets of St. Charles, have some fun with a vast array of colorful characters. If you enjoy their Christmas festival and their Halloween festival, this Valentine's Day, whether you're pro-Valentine's Day or con against Valentine's Day, they've got characters and situations and singers for both to fit any taste. But get out there and have a glass of wine out there, one of the many different places out there that you can sip some wine or get a cocktail and hang out and have some fun, grab lunch with a friend or whatever it is you want to do. It's a great time to visit St. Charles no matter the time of year. Start your trip at the website, discoverstcharles.com. That's discoverstcharles.com. As we always say, it's an historically good time. My next interview, when I first was introduced to this series, I was like, man, this can't be right. This has got to be made up. Nope, 100% true. And the Emmy Award-winning directors Chapman Way and Macclain Way, they're brothers, they bring in this new documentary series. It's just out of control bonkers. I'm going to go ahead and let them tell you about Kings of Tupelo. Here we go.
Right now we're talking to Emmy Award-winning directors, writers, producers Chapman and Macclain Way, a brand new series dropped on Netflix on December the 11th, The Kings of Tupelo, which is absolutely bonkers. Gentlemen, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having us on. We're excited to talk about this one. It's a wild one. Thanks for having us on, Jason.
It is. They sent me a trailer for it, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This can't be real. We've got a drive-by shooting an elephant. We've got an Elvis impersonator going up against a magician. It almost seems too crazy to be believed. Talk a little bit about how this story was brought to your attention.
Yeah, we kind of had a vague memory of, in 2013, an Elvis impersonator from Tupelo, Mississippi, which is the birthplace of Elvis Presley, was arrested for trying to assassinate President Barack Obama with poisonous letters filled with ricin, this very dangerous poison. And so we kind of remembered that headline, and Mac and I flew up to Tupelo. We're like, God, maybe there's more to the story. What happened here? And quickly, after landing in Tupelo, realized there's a whole hell of a lot more to the story. Just kind of one jaw-dropping turn of events after the other. You hit on a few of them. Some of the ones you missed involves severed heads and black market organ trade and feuds with karate instructors. And it basically is just one bizarre story that you truly never know where it's going to go.
With all the bizarre antics, I had to look. I'm like, is there a Tupelo, Florida? No, this is Mississippi. Okay, I'm just making sure, because weird things happen in Florida, it seems like. But I'm curious. Obviously, you mentioned this takes place in 2013. How long from when this hit your guys' radar to when the filming started? How big of a gap was there? And then how long did this project take to film?
Yeah, of course. So we remember when this happened in 2013. What's interesting is that these ricin letters that were sent out that were traced back to Tupelo, Mississippi, they were intercepted about 48 hours right after the Boston Marathon bombing in April 2013. So this was a big story, but it was a little bit more page two compared to the Boston bombing story.
Sure.
Excuse me. And so we had a vague recollection of that headline, Elvis impersonator arrested for Obama assassination attempt. We dug back in about 2021 and then started filming right around then. And so it's been about a three and a half year process. We spent a total of about 9 months in Tupelo shooting, the rest of the time editing. And, now that it's out, it's really exciting to see it start to take off.
And you started with your premiere documentary, The Battered Bastards of Baseball, in 2014. You've won awards for so many of your projects. Is documentary filmmaking, I almost feel like we're experiencing a renaissance, especially with streaming services bringing us so many of these. Is that kind of your feelings as well?
Absolutely. I think the last, 5-10 years have kind of been the golden age of documentary filmmaking. I think the production values, the way the stories are told, how, the thrilling nature of them, the stranger than fiction element, edge of your seat storytelling has really been embraced in the nonfiction community. We've certainly embraced it as documentary filmmakers. And for us, it's kind of our favorite genre to work in. You get to meet a lot of different, unique, eccentric individuals. And then we're kind of tasked with bringing their stories to the world. So for us personally, couldn't ask for a cooler job to do.
We mentioned your Emmy Award-winning Wild Wild Country, of course, was the controversial about the cult leader in Oregon. When you're seeking these out, obviously this is kind of, you've got this great niche going with these. What is it that kind of brings you to, hey, let's do a documentary on this? Because you guys have had some wild and crazy ones. Obviously, Kings of Tupelo, no exception. What is it that kind of makes your ears perk up as writers, directors, producers and say, hey, let's cover something like this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's like we do look at a lot of stories. We usually invest a lot of time and development in these stories before actually deciding to go make them, because it's kind of like choosing your college you're going to go to. These things can take 3 to 4 years, so
right.
You certainly want to pick one that you're not going to lose the enthusiasm for having every day. But I think the big priority for us is obviously just picking a story and trying to immerse audiences in it that keeps them guessing a little bit of the left, the right, the twists and turns, the ups and downs, good cliffhangers. To keep an audience engaged is certainly no easy challenge, and that's not just our medium, that's all mediums, but that's at the top of our list. And I think the second and third thing that we always look for, which helps in that endeavor, larger than life characters in a very unique setting. That's really what we care about. We call it world building. And in Wild Wild Country, it was in eastern Oregon in the high mountain desert plains up there. And it was a really influential aesthetic in our decision. For Kings of Tupelo, you couldn't ask for a better place than the birthplace of the king, the
right.
birthplace of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. And we really enjoyed bringing audiences down there. And hopefully you get to feel and taste the town, in a similar way that we did as filmmakers.
I'm very curious also, you've obviously got several of these subjects that you've covered that are just fantastic. At this point, now that you have been doing this and you've gotten awards racked up and everything, do you have people coming to you to pitch stuff, or are you still in the throes of, hey, no, we've got 4 or 5 other subjects that we really want to dig into? How is the process of selecting the topic of the next thing come up?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a hybrid. It's a little bit of both. We definitely get a lot of incoming, anything from strangers on Instagram reaching out with stories and stranger than fiction stories to people approaching us, to us going out and doing our own investigations and our own research. Tupelo was something that we went out, flew out to Tupelo, started looking into, kind of found the story and did it. But, our next project was something that Netflix brought to us and we partnered with them on. We've been editing a 10-part series on Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys for the last year, which I think should be coming out this summer, hopefully. And that was a partnership with Netflix. So every project's a little different. We're kind of, it doesn't matter to us. If it's a great story, larger than life characters, we're in, count us in.
When you first heard this story that you're covering here in the Kings of Tupelo, you travel there, you start digging into it. Did the idea of how you would approach this, was there something that said, oh, we have to completely change what we're doing and how we're covering this because we've just unearthed this, or we talked to this person and it's changed it? Or is the final project kind of what you intended all along?
It's a great question. I think like a couple things changed along the way. One is that we initially envisioned this as a 2-parter and it grew to 3 parts. And, I'm sure every filmmaker, when they start on a project, it falls in love with their own story and feels like they need a longer runway to tell the story. But we did truly feel that, and Netflix was unbelievable partners in allowing us to do that. But I think one unique thing about the production is, you land in Tupelo, Mississippi, and it is a small town, and everyone's so friendly there. You start talking to the person that's checking you in at your hotel or the person that's taking your coffee order. And we would tell them, hey, we're working on a 2013 presidential assassination story. And every single person in Tupelo had a connection to this story, whether their sister-in-law played with Kevin at the blah, 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 or whether their grandmother was a judge that did da, da, da. And eventually that became such a common occurrence for us that we decided we need to interview the town of Tupelo itself. And so we have these segments in the Kings of Tupelo where you're kind of just talking to the Tupelo locals about Kevin or about this crazy story or about the hospital. And it's not just filler. These locals have true connections, true insight into this story. And that was really, really fun for us, was to be able to talk to a bunch of people and get their quick takes and perspectives. And it hopefully gives you a bigger sense of what Tupelo is like.
As a layman, I watch documentaries and I think to myself, well, I'm fascinated by these. But in my opinion, I would think the hardest part about doing a documentary is the final editing process. Am I correct in that assumption, or is there something other that I'm looking over that's more difficult than that?
No, editing is definitely kind of where the bulk of the time is spent. I think when you're doing a feature film, you have your screenplay, it's all written beforehand, but documentaries, a lot of it is written in the edit bay. A lot of it is sculpted and crafted in the edit bay. I mean, I even just think about our interview with our main character in this, Paul Kevin Curtis. It was a 34-hour interview spread out over 4 days.
Wow.
And so even just taking a 33-hour interview and whittling it down to probably about an hour of screen time is a massive undertaking. It's a massive task, but it's really what we love doing the most. We really love crafting stories. We really like finding unique ways to bring audiences into it and really trying to create just a wild roller coaster ride for the audience to go on.
And my last question, we've already mentioned several of your projects that have just been well received. You're working on the new one now. We talked about people bringing stuff to you. Where do you guys draw the line? What is almost a bridge too far is what you won't cover when you're presented with ideas, even if they may seem intriguing? Is there a certain line that, well, let's not go there? Is there something that's really a bridge too far for you, or is it just...
We haven't. We've gotten lucky that we have not been in that situation yet. We're pretty much open to everything. We try not to judge these characters or these stories too much. I always say, like, in my personal life, I'm a moralist, but as an artist and a filmmaker, we try not to be moralists. And if it feels important to bring to the country, to the world, we're down for telling it.
Chapman Macclain Way, you can catch The Kings of Tupelo on Netflix. It began on December the 11th, so go check it out. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thanks for having us. It was great talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
There they go. Check that one out. It is a lot of fun, and it's just one of those things, until you see it, you almost don't believe it. It sounds like it's too much. There's no way that could possibly have happened. But, yep, they did a great job with that one, so check it out. Kings of Tupelo on Netflix. We're going to take another quick commercial break. We're going to come back in just one moment. My interview with Joshua Zetumer. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. Please stand by.
Hi, this is Andrea Romano. I happen to be the voice director for many animated series, including the Justice League. You are listening on Geek to Me Radio.
Welcome back to the show, Geek to Me Radio. I'm your host, James Enstall. I want to make sure we tell you about our official comic book sponsor, Bugs Comics and Games. If you want to check them out on Instagram, it's Bugs Comics AND Games. He's got stuff up there. Larry puts items up for you to buy. If you see something you like, maybe your local comic book store didn't get a certain game in, or a certain graphic novel, or a certain comic book variant cover, Larry puts those things up on his Instagram page. So if you see something you like, you can just say, hey, I'd like that. Send him a comment. He will send you an invoice. You pay the invoice with PayPal, and then he ships the items straight to your door just like that. I know a lot of places have had local comic book stores closed since the pandemic. And obviously in this economy, sometimes they aren't able to stick with it. So the fact that we have a brick and mortar comic book store like Bugs Comics and Games here in the greater St. Louis, St. Charles area makes me very happy indeed, especially given the fact I've been going to Larry to get my comic book since before I could drive. He used to own a store on West Florissant. I'd ride my bike up there in snow, much like we just recently got, and I'd get my comic books from him every week, and it tickles me that I'm still doing it. Here we are, more than 30 years later, that's scary to think about, but nonetheless, it's really cool. If you haven't had a chance to go check out Bugs Comics and Games on Bryan Road in O'Fallon, Missouri, what's stopping you? If you're in this area and you're wanting to buy some comic books, head on over. He's got everything you'd want from new comics every single Wednesday from Marvel, Dynamite, DC, Image, Titan, whoever your favorite comic book publisher might be. He's got them all right there. He's got supplies, bags and backboards. He's got all sorts of Silver Age to Bronze Age comics in his case to fit different prices. If you're wanting to spend a little bit of money, maybe you want to upgrade your collection, you want to get a really nice first appearance or a key issue, he's got those there for you. And of course, all the way down to dollar books. If you just want to fill in some holes, you got a run of a certain comic book and you're like, man, I'm missing it. I'm missing Thunderstrike issue 14, or gosh, I wish I had that issue of Batman number 157. I missed out on that. Go pick it up from Larry. He's got it out there probably, and if he doesn't, he can usually find it for you. I've asked before. I'm like, man, I don't see this one comic. I'm looking for Amazing Spider-Man 404. He's like, check back with me next week. And of course, I come in next week. Somehow he's got it. It's like magic. Check him out. Let him be your new local comic book store. Bugs Comics and Games on Facebook as well. Give his page a like. Very proud to have them as the official comic book sponsor here on Geek to Me Radio. My next interview, Joshua Zetumer. I wish I had more time with this guy because there was so much to talk about. He's got the series Say Nothing streaming now on Hulu. Here's how that interview went.
Right now, we're talking with writer, filmmaker, executive producer Joshua Zetumer about his brand new series, Say Nothing, now streaming on Hulu. Joshua, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's such a fascinating period. I mean, we see movies and TV series touch on this. Even Dairy Girls, which was my favorite series, kind of touched a little bit on this as it happened in the 90s. But this is going back to the 70s. Talk a little bit about the extensive research you did for making this series.
Absolutely. And can I just say, we also have the director of Dairy Girls directed 4 of our episodes.
Fantastic.
Michael Lennox, he's a Belfast native, and he directed episodes 1 and 2, and then also 7 and 8. 1 and 2, and 8 and 9. The sort of the episodes with the most lightness and the episodes with the most darkness.
Oh, wow.
And I think, when it came to the research process, authenticity was like at the top of my mind. And so I spent years researching the Troubles, doing a deep dive into the history of the period. My first job in Hollywood was writing about the IRA when I was like 26 or 27 or something like that. And so I'd already known a lot about it from when I was significantly younger. But as you can tell from my voice, I'm not from there. I'm an American. And so I'm really an outsider trying to tell this story. And so trying to treat it with as much sensitivity and respect as I possibly could. And that really meant just like doing the work. It meant doing the work, reading just everything I could. And then also, if Mike had an issue with the location, this is Michael Lennox, our director, if he had an issue with the location or felt like something didn't feel right, I really wanted to listen.
And this is based on the novel by Patrick Radden Keefe. I know, did a deep dive. I think if I read one of the interviews and you said your YouTube history, thought you were in Belfast and started giving you restaurant recommendations for somewhere there in Belfast when you wanted to go out to eat.
This is true. There was like a 3-month period where it says, I think I had switched off access location, and it just assumed that I was like somewhere on the Falls Road in Belfast. It only lasted for a couple months, but yeah, I mean, YouTube and the internet is such an incredible resource. Writing a story like this, like obviously the best thing you could do is interview people, and I interviewed 4 members of the IRA. I interviewed, a number of people who'd known Bellers and Marion Price, and just to try to make it as authentic as possible. But at a certain point, you can only interview so many people, and the internet is like an incredible tool for me. Just shaping some of the language and just hearing kind of the like different music of the way people speak. I think, you can get a ton of that through the interview. You can even track Jerry Adams' entire political ascent through YouTube clips. You can see him go from a kind of like rougher, you can track the evolution of his hair through and his what he does with his voice through YouTube clips, because he's got some really early stuff where he seems like more rough around the edges, and then he's got these later appearances where he's incredibly polished, and you can really get a sense of it online. It was integral in writing the story, to be honest.
You've got a great variety of projects under your belt with RoboCop reboot from 2014, Patriots Day, the infamous. I'm curious, did you petition and solicit to get attached to this project? Did they approach you? How did this collaboration and having you come on and kind of show run this whole thing come about?
Yeah, so as I said, my first job was writing a film about the IRA. I actually wrote it for Leonardo DiCaprio. It was the first time I was ever paid to be a writer in Hollywood, which at the time, it was a prestigious gig. And I was like 26 or 27. I was very lucky, very blessed to be put in that position. And the film never got made, but it was going to be produced by David Benioff, who created Game of Thrones, and then also Brad Simpson, who was working with Leonardo DiCaprio at the time. And Brad Simpson is a producer on Say Nothing. So he read the book, I think, before it was published, and remembered that I had written this script about the IRA 15 years prior, and then slipped me the book before it was way out in the world in a big way, and asked if I wanted to do it, because he knew that I was sort of steeped in the troubles, and he knew that, my writing style, I think, would probably be a good fit for the book. I really wanted to make it propulsive and kinetic and really capture the kind of exuberance of youth, focusing on these two sisters who get caught up in a violent movement.
And I'm curious, with two parents who are both psychiatrists, did they fully support you with your screenwriting endeavors and your desire to be part of Hollywood, or was there a little pressure to go into the family business at any point?
No, my brother's in the family business. My brother's a doctor. I come from a family of doctors. And basically, no, they were always incredibly supportive. I mean, I was a jazz drummer before this.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was like going to be a jazz drummer. That was my like life plan when I was 16, 17. And when I told them my backup plan was screenwriting, they definitely like blinked, and they were like, "Do you want like maybe like a more secure backup plan, perhaps?" So definitely, they knew that I'd always kind of done things my own way, and no, they were always extremely supportive, and certainly like having that psychological lens at an early age was, had a huge impact on my writing. I mean, it was always like, my parents were very interested in like why people did the things they did. Mm-hmm. And that stuck with me from the time that I was a kid. And really, I think looking at the world through a psychological lens, that was always what I wanted to do with this show in particular, is really try to get under the skin of why would somebody leave a bomb in the street? What would compel them to do that, Yeah. And try to approach it. Obviously, I have deep feelings about leaving a bomb in the street. Like, I do not believe that anyone should be leaving a bomb in the street.
Right.
And at the same time, like, it was incredibly easy for Dullars and Marion to justify leaving a bomb in the street. And if you look historically, like, I think Dullars had perhaps some guilt and certainly like a great deal of uncertainty about doing the various things that she's done. But, planting bombs, something like that, is always something that the sisters, or particularly Dullars, she even looks back on it with a certain degree of pride. And I think for me, that's incredibly alien, right? It's incredibly alien.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way personally. The alien to like the vast majority of people, but at the same time, I just felt it was psychologically so worth exploring, frankly. How does somebody get to that place? How does society get to that place? And so that's one of the things I was really interested in.
Gosh, I've got about 50 other questions I want to ask you about. I know we have a short amount of time, but I'm a huge James Bond fan, so I have to ask you, coming in doing script revisions on Quantum of Solace, what was the process of that like, and were you a James Bond fan going in?
I was a huge James Bond fan going in. I mean, everyone was. I mean, who wouldn't be? I think I'd seen Casino Royale, and I was blown away by it, like everybody else was. I had an insane process on that one. So I had written this script about the IRA that was like in development. And based on that script, I got a call and from my manager, who said the director of Quantum of Solace, Mark Forster, had read that script that I wrote and wanted me to work on the new James Bond film. And the thing that was so insane is that I was like 27. I was like 27 or 28, and I'd never gotten a movie produced, and I couldn't believe that they wanted me to work on the film. I mean, I was so young, and they're like, get on a plane, you're going to Panama, and I was so young that actually the first actor who ever said any of my dialogue aloud was Daniel Craig in a James Bond movie, and I was just stunned, frankly, that I was in that position and having that experience. I'm so grateful, and I'm so grateful to the Broccoli family for letting me be part of the ride, because it was wild, and I get to be there for Daniel Craig's 40th birthday, I believe. Maybe I'm getting the date wrong, but yeah, he was gifted one of Sean Connery's watches. Oh my gosh. I don't know from which movie it was, Goldfinger, something like that. And I was just like, geez, I couldn't believe it. I was so blown away by the whole experience.
Man, and if what we're saying here is catching your ear, make sure you check out Say Nothing, streaming now on Hulu. I've got so many more questions. We need to have you on again at some point, but I know you have to go. Joshua Zetumer, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Be well.
There he goes. Check out that on Hulu. Say Nothing. Great series by a great executive producer, writer, director. And yeah, I need to get him on because I wanted to talk so much more about Quantum of Solace, but that's okay. We'll see if we can figure that out down the road. We're going to take another quick commercial break. We'll be right back with my final interview. And this one was they're all great interviews that I've got here. I feel I had fun recording all these, but this next one, if you're a 90s kid and you grew up with Lisa Frank, this is going to be one you're going to want to check out. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. Please stand by.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
Welcome back to the show, Geek to Me Radio. I'm your host, James Enstall. We have an exciting announcement about Two Rivers Comic Con. We've got a lot of great guests coming up. I've got a couple more that I'm just waiting on confirmation of before I can tell you. But boy, we've got Mark Bagley coming for my money, one of the best Spider-Man artists out there. Roy Thomas, Stan Lee's successor at Marvel Comics. Stan Lee handpicked Roy to be his successor as editor when Stan stepped away, creator of a lot of the cool stuff. We've got Chuck Patton, who worked on Justice League and Teen Titans. We've got Phil Hester and Andy Park, who you'll know from their run on Green Arrow. They've done a lot of other stuff too, but that Green Arrow was my introduction to them when Kevin Smith was writing that book with the reboot, and it was just so good. Their art style really grabbed me. And of course, we've got Keith Williams, one of the best artists in the business. The commission lists are open for these guys too, so there's something you might want to check out. See who we're bringing in. Go to the number 2 riverscomiccon.com. I've got a lot of cool things on deck. I want to tell you about it so bad, but we're still waiting on a couple of things to fall into place. A couple other vendors who we're going to be working with, a couple of other guests who we might be bringing in, and some collaborations we're going to have that I'm very excited about. The tickets are going to go up next month, so make sure if you haven't gotten your weekend pass, it's just $35. Did I mention Phil Lamar, Susan Eisenberg, Maria Canals-Barrera, Alan Burnett, and Dan Reba will also be in attendance. If you're a Justice League fan of the DC Universe, it's worth just coming to see them. So be sure to pop by Two Rivers Comic Con. Get your tickets on sale now. My very last interview is a fascinating one. If you were a 90s kid at all, you know all about Lisa Frank. I'm going to be talking with these two ladies who will tell you more.
Right now we're talking with Mary Robertson and Arianna LaPenne about a brand new docuseries on Prime, Glitter and Greed, the Lisa Frank story. Ladies, thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Of course, my wife was a huge Lisa Frank fan, and she had, she was, oh my gosh, you're interviewing these people? We have to watch this. So we immediately sat down and watched the first two parts. But what a cast of characters in this docuseries. Talk a little bit about the genesis of this idea, how the idea for this particular series came about.
Well, perhaps like your wife and perhaps like yourself, Arianna and I grew up completely obsessed with Lisa Frank products. I remember walking down the aisle of the Ames department store that was filled with Lisa Frank products and wanting every single one. I remember the joy and the delight that they evoked when I held them in my hands. And then we had noticed that the products had faded from presence in a way. They're not today as the company still exists, but the products aren't as omnipresent as they were in my childhood. So there's a mystery there. What happened to Lisa Frank Incorporated? And we dug in and pretty quickly discovered, you can pretty quickly find some accounts from former employees in an article called Inside the Rainbow Gulag by Tracy Morrissey on various online forums. You can find accounts, and then we started calling former employees ourselves and started hearing from them directly. And many of them said, okay, on the outside, these designs were so cheerful and optimistic and brightly colored, but I had an experience working there that I would not characterize as happy or cheerful or brightly colored in any way. And there were some really troubling aspects to it. It suggested, many of them also said, I've just been waiting for you to call for so long, for you in the sense that it's someone who's deeply interested in telling this story, because working there was the best time of my life, and yet it was a time that I regret. And the fact that they could feel all of these things, have these contrasting emotions, and that there was this inherent sort of tension and contrast between what the brand was pushing forth on the outside and what some people experience some of the time on the inside, we said, my gosh, there's got to be a really incredible story here, and also a story that will resonate with many of our viewers who, like myself, grew up so attached to the products, and a story that is ultimately about work. It's about our relationship to work, and it's about what we go through, I think also, especially when we're trying to make art in this moment in American history, right? You're trying to earn a living and make art. So we were all in, and Arianna LaPenne, our incredible director, also obsessed with the product, also all in. Our partners at Prime Video, also all in. So we have a great team.
I'm curious, both of you have worked on multiple projects that have just been well received. Obviously, Mary, you did the Quiet on Set, the Dark Side of Kids TV. And Arianna, you've done lots of stuff like Lost Women of Highway 20 and other stuff you both worked on. How did the two of you come to collaborate on this one?
Arianna and I worked together years ago when Arianna was a cinematographer at DP, and it was a great experience, and we've stayed in touch. And when we, from time to time, I would pitch her on ideas. And what about this? What about this? She's like, I don't know. And then I said, what about Lisa Frank? She said, I'm in. I just knew it would look amazing. Like, who doesn't want to make a show about the most colorful brand in American history, basically? It's like the rainbow. Like, I knew we could do something really unique looking, and the whole look of the show is basically an homage to that aesthetic. Like, when you watch it, you'll notice each person is a color of the rainbow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When viewed together. Somebody said online, it's like the series, so not to toot my own horn, but someone said, the series is so beautiful, it's like watching a Lisa Frank folder on screen. I love that.
I can see that. Yeah. And just the graphics and the opening, I normally, it's one of the things, do you skip the opening? Yeah. It's very mesmerizing, the opening.
Yes. The idea is to create that feeling you had as a kid looking at the products. It was mesmerizing.
Well, I was curious, you mentioned the toxic workplace environment, and I'm at that point now where someone says something happened in the 90s. I'm like, oh, that was just 10 years ago. Oh, no, wait, that was a while ago, because they talked in the documentary some of the stuff, like when the guy had the heart attack, the accountant had the heart attack and died, and they just wheel him out, and James Green says, nobody asked for time off. What was the big deal? That would be unheard of now, just 25 years later after some of the stuff happened. It's mind-boggling to think how far society has come in some ways.
I know, right? I have that feeling all the time, too. I'm like, you mean 10 years ago in the 90s? I'm like, oh. It's actually been long enough
that now teenagers are wearing the same jeans that I wore when I was a teenager. Like it's the 90s was so long ago that it's come full circle to be cool again.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, why I think I love this series, because it's like, let's relive the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and that's kind of my wheelhouse, so I had no problem with that as well. As we're watching, I mentioned this colorful cast of real life characters on here. My wife and I just kind of looking at each other. I'm like, this person kind of reminds me of yeah. So we started fan casting if this was to be made into a Hollywood a movie, actually, up from the docuseries. And we kind of settled on Lisa Frank should be played by Wendy Malick, James Green by Steven Weber, Rondi Coots by Parker Posey, Tony DeLuz by Oscar Nunez, and we had Tracy Egan Morrissey by Aubrey Plaza. Thoughts?
Oh my God, I love it.
Pretty good. That's pretty good. I think, yeah, I'd like to work with your wife sometime.
I'm writing this down because my dream is to turn this into a scripted series.
It's just I think the most interesting is a loose word, was James Green, because at one point he's like, I never had a temper. Sure, I yelled at people. I thought about flipping the table over. Yeah, I guess I was doing cocaine, but who wasn't? Just some of the stuff I'm like, this isn't a real life person. Which of the characters that you interviewed, I shouldn't say again characters, but which of the people you interviewed was the most difficult to nail down?
Oh, what do you think?
It was very important to us to get as close to the story as we possibly can. Of course, we reached out to Lisa Frank herself on many occasions and really hoped that she would participate. In the end, she declined an interview, but offered us a statement that we include at the end of each episode. Naturally, we reached out to James Green, her former business partner, and her ex-husband. And he wrote back to us and he said, I'll never forget the email that came our way. It said, I am the real Lisa Frank, all in caps. And it had multiple exclamation points at the end. And we said, my gosh, he's got a story to tell, right? And one that he feels passionately about. And I'm very, I'm pleased that we're able to offer him the chance to, to speak directly to the audience in a way and to speak about something that means so much to him and to offer an account that no one else had really heard before. It's really the first time that he's shared his experiences on camera.
Yeah, I mean, no one had spoken to him. I don't know if no one had been able to reach him or find him. He was living in Mexico. It was quite a journey. But I knew that something that had such a complicated history and such a kind of mythical end, there would be a story there, and I knew he would want to. There's no way he doesn't want to talk about it, right? There's got to be something there.
You both are professionals. We mentioned some of the stuff you've worked on already. I always think as a layman that the hardest part of the documentary must be in the editing process, because you get all this great stuff. You're like, oh, we're going to use that. But then time constraints hit. And even though this is a 4-part docuseries, my twofold question is, A, was there thought about making it a little longer, or was the 4 kind of what you were locked in with? And also, what was the most difficult part of the editing process in putting this together?
You're right. I think the editing is often the most challenging part of the process. And I think it probably was in this case. I think in particular because we're trying to tell one story with many voices and, finding a way to sort of, maintain, not lose the audience, right? Which is, we don't want to create confusion and we want to make sure that there's clarity and honestly represent the truly wild account of what happened inside those 4 walls that Lisa Frank incorporated. Arianna, some favorite scenes that we had to cut out. There's always that.
Also, I mean, the thing that was probably the hardest is we really worked to corroborate every single thing that's said in here. And there was a lot of even crazier, wackier things that people told us, but we really did our journalistic due diligence here and made sure that everything you see on screen is something that multiple people, could corroborate. So that was a super tricky part of the editing process because, of course, you want to tell all the wildest tales, but
our commitment is to accuracy above anything else.
But also, and it's like at the end of the day, you want people to have fun while they're watching it. So this series is the result of both of that, which is, working really on the music, the look, the editing, the timing, the pacing, and just making it feel lively and fun like it did in the 80s and 90s, like capturing that feeling of enjoying those products as a kid and having some of that lighthearted spirit while also telling some of the darker side of the story.
All I can say is
life. It's bright and it's dark and it's happy and it's crazy and it's sad at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. All I can say is if fun and informative are what the two of you were going for, you both knocked it out of the park. Again, Glitter and Greed, the Lisa Frank story, now streaming on Amazon Prime. Mary Robertson and Arianna LaPenne, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Tell me who's your screencast. I didn't get that one, and I wanted to check who you said. For
which one?
For James.
James Green. I was thinking Steven Weber.
Steven Weber. Okay. All right.
Thanks.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
There they go, and that's going to do it for us. We are out of time. Thank you to all my guests. I hope you enjoyed these particular interviews. Make sure you check them out. Make sure you follow Two Rivers Comic Con on Instagram and on Facebook for more updates, and on X as well. Check out my YouTube channel, Geek to Me Radio on YouTube. And until next week, my friends.
It's not in the way you watch I zombie. It's not in the way you watch The Flash. It's not in the way you love Scotty Young art. It's not in the way you play Mario Kart. It's not in the way you look when you make Game of Thrones references. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio. That's our show.